Welcome, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. I was hoping to also welcome some folks on Facebook. The Facebook stream I don't think is working. I will work on that as soon as I hand it over to Erin. But welcome. In the meantime, welcome to tonight's Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools Board of Education Candidate Forum. Thank you all for being here. Tonight's forum will be simultaneously translated into Spanish. The instructions are currently on the screen and will also be posted in the chat for your reference for everybody as they come into the meeting. Our moderator for this evening is Erin Keck. Erin is the host of This Morning with Erin Keck every weekday from 6 to 9 on 97.9 The Hill, WCHL, providing local news as well as music and conversations with local leaders and experts. He's been with WCHL since 2010, hosting the afternoon show before taking over the morning show this year. He also has a PhD in political science and teaches American government at Durham Tech. Thank you, Erin, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Cassie, and thanks to all of the panelists and organizations who are coming together to make tonight possible. Thanks to all of you for listening. And thanks for having me. I'm excited about hosting tonight's forum. So we're going to get right into it in just a couple of minutes, but first, just a quick couple of comments about the format and the ground rules. First of all, thanks to all of our sponsors who are making tonight possible. 5 different organizations came together to make this forum happen. So thanks to the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools PTA Council, you just heard from Cassie, the Chapel Hill-Carrboro branch of the NAACP, the League of Women Voters of Orange, Durham, and Chatham counties, Centro, Hispano, and the Chapel Hill-Carrboro Association of Educators. And you've got all 5 of their websites there up on the screen. You should be able to see them. All terrific organizations that have come together to make tonight possible. And thanks to them for doing that and for caring about public education in our community. And thanks also to you all in the community, because we solicited questions for tonight's forum. We got 33 different questions, all submitted online. The 5 different organizations that I just mentioned all came together to select the most popular, the most kind of emblematic questions of all of them. So thanks to everyone who submitted questions. And again, thanks to you for taking the time to attend tonight. 33 questions we got submitted online. We are not even going to be able to cover half of them because we only have a limited amount of time. So if your question is not addressed this evening, the candidates will be happy to hear from you after the forum or via email. They're all readily available as we get into campaign season. And all of the questions that we have gotten through the submissions are going to be shared with the candidates after the forum, so they'll have a chance to check those out as well. And of course, thank you so much to the candidates for making tonight's event possible. We've got 6 of them here. We've got George Griffin, Ryan Jackson, Rizza Jenkins, Meredith Pruitt, Mike Sharp, and Timothy Sukram. And in just a minute, we'll give them all a chance to introduce themselves as we get going. The reason for the season, we're running for Chapel Hill-Carrboro City School Board. We've got 6 candidates for 3 open seats. Every person who wins will serve a 4-year term on the school board, 7 members of the board total. They have a number of important duties, as many of you already know, providing every student with the opportunity to receive a sound basic education. That's a legal phrase. That is a constitutional requirement for the state and for school districts, and the school board is responsible for making that happen in Chapel Hill-Carrboro. The Board of Education hires the superintendent, approves the superintendent's recommended budget presentation to county commissioners, and once that budget is allocated, they adopt the budget afterwards. They form goals and objections for the district. They perform judicial functions and hearings. And finally, and certainly not least, they serve as an advocate for district staff and for students in all interactions with members of the public and all other governmental entities. And we're talking about towns and county commissioners all the way up to state government and beyond. So that's what the school board is charged with doing. The election is going to be, election day is on November 2nd. Again, we've got 6 candidates in the race running for 3 open seats. Early voting begins in just a couple of weeks. Today is Tuesday, the 28th. Early voting begins 2 weeks from Thursday, October 14th, and runs until October 30th. A reminder, and we'll So you have a lot of information about this as we get closer to the start of early voting period. If you're not yet registered to vote, never fear, you can register and vote on the same day during the early voting period. That's not an option for election day. It's certainly an option during early voting. So if you need to change your registration or you haven't registered, you can do it then. And of course, election day is also just around the corner on Tuesday, November 2nd. So that basically sums up the reason why we're here. Quick note about the ground rules to all of the candidates: watch the clock. We've got a timer up there. Stay within your time limits. For most questions, you will have a minute to answer. We're trying to get through as many as possible, so no more than a minute to answer the questions. For those questions, we'll have a timer counting down. Once we get to 20 seconds left, it'll show yellow. Once it gets to 10 seconds left, it'll show red. If you start to use any acronyms or political jargon, please explain those. I'll try to jump in and ask you to clarify acronyms, but I might not be able to get through them all. And this is for everyone. If you are actively speaking or answering a question, make sure to unmute yourself. The entire rest of the time, you should be on mute. So a quick word about the forum format. We're going to give every candidate a chance to introduce themselves and talk about their top priorities for school board. 1 minute for that. Part one is going to be the vast majority of the forum. We've got 10 different questions. And again, 33 were submitted. We've narrowed it down to 10. Each candidate will get a minute to answer each of those. We've got 6 candidates, so that should take a little bit more than an hour. We've got a couple of questions at the very end. That'll be a lightning round. Each candidate will just get a few seconds to answer those. Then we'll have a 1 minute closing statement for each candidate. And at that point, we will be done with the forum. So it'll be very, very quick. We've got a lightning round at the very end, but the whole thing is going to feel like a lightning round, I guarantee you. So without any further ado, let's get started. Our first order of business is to ask the candidates to introduce themselves. Take a minute to do this. Introduce yourself and share your top 3 priorities for the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City School Board if you're elected. 1 minute per candidate. We've got the order up there, and we'll start with Meredith Pruitt. Take it away.
Good evening. I'm Meredith Pruitt. Thanks to Cassie and Aaron and all the sponsors for having us here tonight. I'm the product of public education and the first in my family to graduate from college. I've spent over 20 years in education public policy at the national and state level here in North Carolina. I'm running to refocus the district. I'm running to get it back on track. I'm running because I think we can do better, and I believe education is the great equalizer. My priorities for the district are grounded in common sense and transparency. Ensuring our students are learning full-time and in person with a focus on the fundamentals of reading, math, and science. Tackling the pervasive opportunity gap through data-driven solutions, and empowering our teachers and our administrators and our principals with stronger and more professional development opportunities. I believe I would bring a new and fresh perspective to the board. I believe my skill set and experience would complement the current board. And I believe I can speak and act for those who currently feel unrepresented. I look forward to the questions, and thanks again to the organizers for hosting this forum.
That's time. Mike Sharp. Mike, you're muted.
Of course. Hi, I'm Mike Sharp. I am excited to be here, and I wanted to say thanks to everybody who has given us a chance to speak tonight. I am a veteran teacher in the school district. I started teaching here in 2002. I taught at McDougall Elementary for 11 total years. I also taught at Culbreth for 5 years. In addition to that, I also am a parent in the district, and I've got a kid who just graduated from Chapel Hill High who started in kindergarten, another is a junior, and I've got 2 little ones on the way as well. So my main priorities for the school board, first and foremost, is working on the achievement gap, which has been called for years. I'd call it the opportunity gap. I do have some ideas of what we've seen in schools happening, and I know what things have worked and what haven't. I also want to be a champion for underrepresented groups like ESL and EC populations that frequently get left out of conversations. And I'm out of time.
Jenkins.
Good evening. Thank you to our sponsors in the community. My name is Rizza Jenkins. Over the past 11 years in this district, as a community member and parent of 3 children, I have volunteered in a variety of roles in the PTA, school improvement team, district committees, and task force in the community. I'm a change agent with a proven track record in strategic decision-making in order to provide the best educational outcomes for all students. My 3 focus areas, if elected, will be increasing the intentional work around diversity and equity, ensuring transparency and accountability of the CHCCS district to its stakeholders, our students, staff, and community. And finally, ensuring fiscal responsibility for the funding that we receive from the local, county, state, and federal funds. These 3 focus areas will provide the foundation for decision-making that is focused on all students. Thank you.
George Griffin.
Good evening. My name is George Griffin. My wife and I have lived here in Chapel Hill for over 40 years. We have 2 adult children, now adult children, who both attended Chapel Hill-Carrboro schools, kindergarten through high school. I attended public school in Detroit, Michigan. During my 46-year career in education, I've been a special education teacher, including right here at Phillips Middle School, a high school principal, a local and state level program director. I was on the faculty as a professor at North Carolina Central University, and for the past 10 years, I've been a school system evaluator in 25 states, including North Carolina and 10 foreign countries. My top 3 focus areas or priorities are, first of all, to always ensure that our basic teaching and learning program is sound and solid for all students. I always want to put the general regular classroom first. Secondly, is to finally get something changed to help with the racial opportunity gap. And the third is to focus on our unmet capital improvement needs. Thank you.
Timothy Sucre.
Oh, hi. My name is Tim Sokram. I'm running for school board because I think we can do better. I think our district needs to work with us, not just for us. I think we need a school board that listens, not just to complaints, but to suggestions. I think that Chapel Hill-Carrboro comprise a unique community of just a dazzling amount of expertise that is currently to a large extent untapped. And I think that one of our first main priority is improving communication and transparency. So we understand why the school board is doing something, that they're doing it, and who they're listening to, who are they talking to, how can we have input. My second main focus is going to be on improving infrastructure, and particularly in regards to climate change, start making long-term decisions rather than putting in stopgap measures. And my last is working on creative solutions to improving student achievement, such as things that buoy all students, such as later starts. Thank you.
Ryan Jackson.
Hi, I'm Ryan Jackson. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I have taught online and in-person classes in Tennessee, Western New York, and here in North Carolina. I'm the husband and proud father of 2 students who have gone through the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City School District schools. My main emphasis is that I would like to focus on returning our education back to a common sense and foundational education in mathematics, reading, writing, science, and of course the arts. My second topic would be to help students catch up from a year of online and rushed online instruction. I've seen within my own family the actual regression of learning and loss of knowledge from the past year and a half of online learning. So I think we need to take steps to get students back up to speed to where they should be. And finally, I'd like to take the opportunity to, if elected, to have the Board of Education remember that they serve the community that elected them. And we are here to listen to what they have to say, take into account their recommendations, and act accordingly. We are not a political body using students as stepping stones for political agendas. We're here to serve the community that elected us. Thank you.
Thanks to all 6 candidates for your introduction. We're going to jump right into the questions now, and we will start with question number 1. As soon as it's up there on the chat. There we go. While schools are now open, Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools is facing both staffing shortages, bus drivers, substitute teachers, and elementary teachers, and staff exhaustion from having to take on additional responsibilities like COVID testing, and from losing planning periods to cover classes due to those shortages and the ongoing nature of the pandemic. What should be done both in the short term with federal COVID money, as well as in the long term via the local budget, to avoid vacancies, the corresponding staff burnout, and to provide enough subs and bus drivers for safe schools and safe and timely commuting? You'll have 1 minute to answer all of that. So good luck. We'll start with Ryan Jackson.
Thanks. That's a lot, but I'll give it a shot. I absolutely believe that we should use the COVID money coming in to help alleviate some of the stress that our staff is facing. And teachers are being placed in really an unrealistic position of having to be instructors, as well as being almost medical professionals at this point. So we need to use that money to hire temporary workers to take on some of those duties that really aren't educationally focused. Another part that the question talks about is support staff. We need to really work with the state legislature and get parents of this community involved and address and approach state legislature, try and get more funding for those support things. Beyond that, it's just going to be something that we're dealing with as a nation. Right now, we are in a worker shortage, and we just need to kind of do the best we can. But I think utilizing that COVID money and engaging our state legislators is probably the best things we can do in the short term.
George Griffin.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. Phew, that's a question. One thing we could do with our federal money, and I think we should seriously consider it, is staff bonuses. The healthcare industry has been doing that to just reward workers, reward staff, if you will. And the staff is the heart of our school system, no question about it. The district right now is doing, I think, a remarkable job of trying to increase salaries for some of the short staff positions like bus drivers, for example. And there's a little bit of encouragement on the way in terms of they are starting to hire a few people with a new hourly rate. I do also agree that we should set up some after school, weekend, and extended summer programs as catch up. And that's going to require that would be good use of federal money as well. Thanks.
Mike Sharp.
All right, unmuted this time. Okay, so one of the things that I appreciate the most being a teacher is that this question also addresses just the overwhelming responsibilities that are piled on the plates of teachers. And COVID has certainly given us a lot more jobs that we need to be handling, as well as just doing our regular job of teaching, and as well as trying to catch everyone up from what they've missed during that time. So if we're looking at using federal money to help with that, I agree with what some of the other guys have said about trying to bring in more staff, to look at adding bonuses as encouragement. But I also think we need to think about the actual manpower and people hours of bringing in other people to help out. So if teachers, for example, are expected to work in like a staff civ room or something like that, then maybe we need other people who also work for the district to be coming to help out with that. Lincoln Center people could be doing their jobs from a school so that they could also be handling some of these other responsibilities as well.
Meredith Pruitt.
Sure, great question. I definitely agree with everything that everyone said. I think that, we have to protect the front lines and we have to protect our students. And so we need to ensure that learning in the classroom continues to happen through this. We do have a lot of money coming in from COVID. So thinking about how we resource allocate that to incentivize, like we were saying, I think particularly with the bus drivers, that's sort of been a national tragedy as we've seen. I mean, talk about applauding folks who are on the front lines every morning doing multiple routes back and forth. And so I know the district has done some with incentivizing there, but can we play around with bell schedules? Can we think about different bus routes, things like that? I think would go a long way to helping the bus drivers too. So that's what I have.
Rizza Jenkins.
So COVID highlighted the fact that our schools are essential. Our staff in our schools are essential in our society and our community. They provide support beyond just classroom education. They provide nutrition, social, emotional support, resources. So The short-term bonuses also highlight the big picture long-term problem with salary for every position in education. So I think the district has done a great job with addressing the bus driver shortage with bonuses and things like that, but we need to take a look at offering these same bonuses and incentives to all of our classroom teachers and support staff throughout our district as well, because they've been working equally as hard. And then we need to take back long-term this discussion of salary, because bonuses highlight, if you have to supplement salary bonuses, it highlights the fact that people are underpaid. So we need to go back to our legislators and say, look, we need long-term solutions with salaries.
Timothy Sukram.
Oh, you can just call me Tim. See, this is why I'm voting for George and Mike, because they had great answers, and I was going to say bonuses. Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea to give the teachers a bonus, but I also think they need a little bit of a break. As you said, these are really overwhelming. It's the same thing with the rest of the staff. I think that one maybe creative out of the box solution, or just to think about bringing in volunteers from the community. We used to have volunteers in the schools. We just need to make sure that they follow COVID protocols, and maybe a little more time off. Maybe delegate some of these duties that teachers are taking on that are extra duties that they shouldn't be doing in the first place. I mean, it's very important that they maintain COVID protocols, but do they have to be in charge of every single thing on top of catching kids up and teaching kids, which is already an incredibly hard job? That's it. That's all I got.
Thanks to all the candidates for your answers to the first question. Second question coming up right now. The pandemic, Mike Sharp will be first on this, by the way. The pandemic made clear what often is hidden with respect to our families and food security, or food insecurity as the case may be. While all breakfast and lunch remains free this year due to USDA policies, what do you think the district should do in future years to get students the nutrition they need, both inside and outside of school? Mike Sharp, you're first.
Okay, first of all, I want to take just a second to praise all of our staff during the pandemic who made sure to get food out to all our families while everyone was still at home, because that was just a phenomenal effort on the part of our bus drivers and a lot of our other cafeteria staff to get everyone fed. Now, we know that this is a federal policy, that has been enacted this year that's going to make free breakfast and lunch for kids. But I think we all recognize immediately that that's what we need to be doing all the time. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that can be handled by the school board, because it might be, both a state and national decision as well, and we don't have control of all that funding. But we need to push for it and talk to our state and the federal representatives as much as we can to try to get get those kind of policies continued from now on, because it's definitely going to benefit all of our students.
Sukram.
This is one of those deep-seated problems that really, it says in there that it came to the fore in COVID, but frankly, this is one of those where you're fighting the disease instead of the symptoms in this case. If you help kids out with getting their food, their achievement goes up. If they and their parents are not having to worry about these means-tested free lunch or free breakfast applications, or how much money their kid has to buy lunch, then things are a lot easier for their families. So what we need to look at is basically fighting as hard to hold on to that money, and realizing that this is something that needs to be prioritized as part of the budget, even if we lose this additional funding. That's it. That's all I got.
George Griffin.
And I'd certainly agree with both Mike and Tim on this one. There's nothing worse than being hungry being hungry, period. Certainly while you're in school. So I would support us doing anything if the federal government doesn't continue the lunch and breakfast policies to make that happen for students. There's just no question about it. We're really not going to elaborate too much, except that I would support it. Thank you.
Rizza Jenkins.
Yes, so our district focuses on the whole child, and nutrition is critical. I served on the Food and Nutrition RFP committee for for this previous year where we looked at the contract for our provider for our foods this year. And it was interesting to see how much it costs to provide our meals in this district. And I think something that we could do as a district is look at our budget and see if there's a way that we can reallocate and prioritize making meals free going forward in our district. I know other districts have done it in this country, and I think this is critical. So we remove the barrier for accessing food for all students. Additionally, I think in terms of beyond our schools, so there's meals outside of the regular school day, we've created a great system and network of resources that are shared in our community now of available places for families to get food. And I think we can continue that and expand that even beyond COVID. Thank you.
Ryan Jackson.
Yeah, this is obviously an important topic for our community. And like most people have said before, I would support any initiative to make sure that our students are nutritionally secure, whether that involves new programs or community volunteers to help distribute food, collect food, budget reallocation, make sure food is available to everyone. But I think that it's critical to support education through nutrition as well. One thing that I do worry about though, is putting the extra burden on our already overworked teachers and staff and expecting them to carry out this additional need. We need to involve other community members and also potentially bring in other outside resources that can help make sure nutrition gets to our students. Thank you.
And Meredith Pruitt.
Thanks. This is an incredibly tough problem to have. And I think Tim said it first, if kids can't eat, then they can't learn. We are one of the most highly resourced districts in the state. So I think we need to think creatively about how we are spending money in the district. I think the other piece of this is there are subject matter experts on this. It's ironic that, I used to work at the Department of Education and people would always come up and want to talk about school lunch program and we'd say, we're not the USDA. So there is a little bit of an issue with who funds what and where the school boards and boards of education fall. The other piece I would just point out is that we do have those subject matter experts in the district, and whether it's Table or others who are doing that nonprofit work, our ability to partner with them in a more cohesive manner to allow those students to get the food that they need would be incredibly helpful.
Thanks again to all 6 candidates. Moving ahead to question number 3. Short question this time. George Griffin, you've got the first answer. Short question, but a very significant issue. What specific steps will you take to address the racial disparities in Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools? George Griffin, you're first.
Thanks, Aaron. The racial opportunity gap has been with us for as long as the schools have been integrated, 50 years at this point. The first thing I would do is revisit the Campaign for Racial Equity's report that they published in 2015 with the 8 equity goals. There were a number of people that are in the audience that were part of that group. They have some sound recommendations for things that need to be done. Specifically, a look at we call it tracking. We have an over-identification of identifying honor students and students who are doing well that ends up with minority students not in the mix. So we need to look at that. We need to look at our discipline policies and our out-of-school suspension rates. Things can be changed there, and these are going to require board policy and system changes. Thank you.
Meredith Pruitt.
Sure. So reading is so fundamental, and if you can't read, you'll never be successful. We know that students who struggle to read are going to struggle in other subjects, and they're more likely to drop out of school. And this is particularly impacted for the minority and low-income students. We had our end of grade test scores that came out this past year, with only 61% of our students on grade level in reading and math. And of that 61%, only 25% of those kids are African American. So that's a problem for our district. I think we need to think about reading interventions at an earlier age. I think we need to think about partnerships in the community, like partnering with the PTA and the YMCA on after school programs and normalizing reading after school with parents and and guardians 20 minutes a day up to 60 minutes a day. So I think reading is one of the keys to bridging and solving that opportunity gap.
Tim Sukram.
I think one of the fundamental contributors, well, actually there's been research to this, one of the fundamental contributors to racial socioeconomic performance gap in students is preschool. And as soon as the federal government gets its act together and decides if it wants to fund the American Families Act or not, and starts introducing pre-K programs and making them more available in districts like ours or districts across the nation, I think that is one major way that we can bridge the gap and make sure that folks who either can't afford preschool or don't know about the benefits that it makes, or can't afford a quality educational preschool that rather than part-time care or whatever it may be. We need to make that available, and we need to work on introducing those programs in our school system and taking the programs that we have and building them out, because that is one of the major contributors to the differences in educational performance.
Ryan Jackson.
Hi, yeah, as I believe George said before, this is not a new issue. This has been with us since the school district has been in place. And I think part of the reason is that we look at the racial achievement gap and we try to attack that without really looking at what is causing that gap. We're trying to treat the symptom without attacking the actual cause of the problems. I think we need a more data-driven approach to find out what is actually causing these disparities and go after those, whether that means enhanced preschool, whether that means a stronger emphasis, like Meredith said, on reading fundamentals, or whether it's foundational education. But I think we need to really focus on what is causing this gap, as opposed to just throwing resources at a racial disparity without understanding what is causing that disparity.
Next, sir.
I'm going to jump right off of what Ryan said. If we're looking at what's causing this disparity, we have to consider racial equity training and racial equity education. Because if you look at, George mentioned before, the issue of tracking. So we've got white kids 16 times more likely to be placed into gifted programs. And the placement is happening with measures that could be affected by personal bias. And so we need to make sure that staff and the community are fully trained to understand what implications might happen based on your own race and your own perception of other people's race. And so I spend a lot of time talking to people about the impact that can have on all of our schools. We have done many programs like this in the past. As a teacher, I've seen things come and go, but they tend to only last a few years and then get cut off. So we need to make sure that we are continuing an effort to get everyone better educated in that issue.
Rizza Jenkins.
So this issue is both a staff and a student issue that we have to look at. First, from a student perspective, I agree with George. The work was done by the Campaign for Racial Equity. So it's time for actually look at that report and actually take a look at what we can implement and do. Secondly, I agree with early childhood education. All three of my kids went through the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools pre-K program. The research is there. Preschool, early education helps close or minimize opportunity achievement gap issues. Additionally, we want to make sure we're looking at a lot of our policies in our district, revisit our discipline policies and things like that. Also, we want to look at our existing programs. We've got some great programs in this district. So we want to look at the ones that are working, and the ones that aren't, we need to have some hard conversations. When it comes to our staff, we need to look at our policies and procedures and ensuring we're hiring diverse staff and providing them the training so they're equipped for success. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question coming up. Tim Sukram, you'll be first on this one. According to the 2020 census, there we go, the Latinx community represents 9.8% of the North Carolina population. 6 out of 10 Latinx Carolinians were born in the US. What can you tell us about your experience working with this community, and how can we help the public education system in our county and in Chapel Hill-Carrboro to be more inclusive? Tim Sukram, you're up first.
It's a tough one. I don't know. I'm from Texas, and I grew up in Houston, and which is the folks tell you it's the most ethnically diverse city in the United States. So it seems kind of unnatural to me for there to be so few Hispanic and Latino folks in North Carolina. You know, where I grew up, there was an entire class in every grade that was Spanish speaking, and I think that there were positives and negatives to that. I thought that to one extent it was kind of excluding those kids and separating them from everybody else. I think that, you know, the school district works pretty hard at being inclusive. I see emails, every email that I get is in 4 different languages at least, and I think maybe hiring staff that speak Spanish or speak other different languages, teaching the kids to speak Spanish, because my kids learn French right now in 1st grade, would be a big help at helping folks be more included.
Rizza Jenkins.
Yes, so I think the district is doing some great work with, we've got 2 schools in our elementary schools in our district that are Spanish schools, FPG and Carrboro Elementary. But I think some other initiatives that we really could do is a lot more outreach in the community, and also looking at our staff throughout our district. It all goes back to students seeing themselves in the leadership and in who's standing in front of them in the classroom, and also other students seeing people who represent their community in their classroom. So one thing I would love to see is more diversity with our staff outside of Carrboro and FPG to represent our greater community. I think the Hispanic community is our largest minority group here in our district. Then it's the Asian community, then it's the African-American community. So I really would love to see more staff, more diverse staff in our district who represent our entire community, so all students can see themselves and their fellow neighbors and community members when they walk into their schools.
Meredith Pruitt.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rizza is exactly right. We have a mandate to educate all our students, and we need to meet our students where they are. So that's a comprehensive strategy. That is getting more people who look like these different groups in the classroom teaching. I worked on the national level to bridge sort of a gap with coalition building with the business community, the civil rights community, and the Hispanic community, to pass federal legislation to work on the opportunity, or back then the achievement gap. So I think there's some coalition building we can do across the state to kind of pinpoint strategies and interventions to get in the classroom earlier, to help these students achieve more quickly, and to get them on grade level.
Mike Sharp.
I'm going to say first off that I agree with what's been said so far, but I think the representation is key. We need to make sure that we have a lot of staff, who are also in the Latinx community, so that the kids see more representation and feel, more like they are a part of the normal group, rather than being excluded and being taught, and pulled out and that kind of thing. So they're feeling like they are a part of the larger group. In my experience working with kids in this community, they're already there. The kids are welcoming of everyone. They're excited to see every new face that comes in and to find out fascinating new stories about where people have been in their lives. They're much more open to that than a lot of their parents' generation are, which is fantastic to see. But we need to build on that. We need to make sure that the rest of the community is caught up with them in that attitude. So we got to make sure that we're welcoming everyone.
George Griffin.
We've certainly made inroads in communication. Latinx families, do still report difficulty with communication sometimes. School people, lack of cultural understanding. They also talk about racial stereotyping with lowered expectations for student performance, and the results in the tracking that we've already talked about. They also have stories, Latinx families have stories of disrespectful treatment in schools, and from both kids and adults, unfortunately. So there are themes out there that these are from the listening sessions, actually from the Campaign for Racial Equity, where they are making, we're making inroads, but we have a ways to go. Thanks.
And Ryan Jackson.
So as far as my experience working with these communities goes, it really goes back to my time teaching at college. I taught at several different community colleges, and that had a large population of Latino students, and they were always fully integrated. I can appreciate some of the hardships they might be going through that I'm not fully aware of as being who I am. But I think one of the things we could do to help them to be more included in the community is to promote their involvement with existing organizations. Really reach out to these students and family members that matter, and get them to join school organizations, get the students to join school clubs, after school activities, sports, get them involved and normalize their existence and their belonging in the school as much as possible. I think as much as we can get them to join in what is happening in the school, in the district and the community, I think they'll feel more integrated and more part of this community, and we'll become more appreciative of them as well.
Thanks to all the candidates for your answers to that question. Next question up right now, and Meredith Pruitt, you'll be first on this one. COVID-19 has shown us how important our school facilities are for the health and safety of our students, staff, and faculty. When it comes to facilities, what top 2 or 3 actions will you take to ensure adequate funding for the capital investment plan? Meredith Pruitt, you're first.
Sure. Well, obviously the health and safety of our students is paramount, as well as our staff and teachers and administrators and principals. So, I mean, I think we need to be really smart about the investments we're making in prevention of safety issues. I think we need to think about facilities and how we're thinking about resourcing them to improve them. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough issue. It's a tough issue. It's an issue I really haven't thought incredibly a lot about, because I think a lot about getting our kids on reading level. So that would be my answer.
Ryan Jackson.
So I think we need to do an evaluation of what facilities and what infrastructure we need to actually prioritize. So we need a top-down evaluation of the district and see what's going on with our schools and what we need to focus on. I think the COVID did emphasize and point out that medical staffing, as far as nurses in the school, is paramount. We have to get students and nurses back into the schools on a regular basis to help our students. And that might also entail making sure there are offices and spaces available for nurses to meet with students and treat them as needed. But another thing, as far as our facilities go, is I think we can't overlook the physical security needs of our students and our schools. That needs to be part of any capital improvement of our buildings, to make sure our students are safe when they walk in the door, because that is, in my mind, that is our #1 priority, making sure students are safe when they walk in the door. So thank you.
Rizza Jenkins.
So our district has already done the work identifying the capital needs within our district, and this hundreds of millions of dollars of need has been sitting out there unfunded for years. And so I think the first step one is to educate the community about what is in this plan. I would encourage, when it's COVID safe, for community members to take tours of schools. And so that's the first thing, right? Outreach and community education. So they understand when we're asking for $200 million, they understand the situation that our students and our staff are living and working in every day. And that would include not just our community members, our elected officials, our county commissioners, our state representatives, and our Congress and our senators as well. Because it's important we prioritize where we're learning. Look, our legislature enacted this class size legislation and did not tie fiscal dollars to it. So it's important that we collaborate with our elected officials to ensure we hold them accountable for the plans that they want us to put in place and the safety of our students.
George Griffin.
Thank you. The district just finished the Chapel Hill High School, complete rebuild, if you will. And that cost a lot more money than had initially been anticipated. It looks beautiful. The fact is, we still have 9 other schools on the original assessment that are unfunded, that need major improvements, repairs and renovations. And the estimated cost now is $200 to $300 million and going up by the day. The county commissioners tell me that they're not able to support another bond issue till 2024. That's 3 years from now. because of their debt limit capacity. So we've got a real problem. We're going to have to work collaboratively with the county commissioners who do have the legal responsibility for capital needs in the district in terms of finances. But at the same time, we have to be realistic. We're going to need to use some local money to get these buildings fixed and up to snuff. Thanks.
Tim Sucrum.
I can speak directly to one of these problems that just bugs me. My daughter's school, Ephesus Elementary, has elevated levels of lead in the pipes, and they can't use the water for anything. They can't use the water to drink. They can't use the water to cook. The chefs in the cafeteria can't prepare the food. So what they've done is put in a bunch of stopgap solutions. They're buying filters for the taps and the water fountains. They're buying tons of bottled water. And what we need to do, if anything, is it convince the folks who are holding the purse strings, convince the folks who would like or are thinking about making donations about where this money is coming from, is that we are wasting money by ignoring these fundamental problems. It costs more in the long term to not fix the big things. And I think that is what we need to focus on. We need to think about long-term thinking, long-term strategies, and not saying, oh, we can't do it now. Meanwhile, we are spending a bunch of money fixing the symptoms instead of fixing the problem. Thanks.
Mike Sharp.
As I mentioned earlier, I've worked at two different schools, one relatively new school and one pretty old school. And moving to Culbreth was eye-opening in a lot of ways, but there wasn't the same kind of storage and office space, things like that. But it wasn't until COVID came around that we really, started to think about, oh, it also doesn't have a good ventilation system, and it also doesn't have proper water supply, like Tim was mentioning a little while ago. So there are a whole laundry list of things, like George said, that have been around forever and still are on the list and haven't been fixed. Now, I've been around long enough to remember several different times that we have had to, grassroots effort to go and basically beg the county commissioners for more money for the things that we need to get funded. And I feel like we need to stop and reevaluate that relationship a little bit and figure out why it is that we keep having those conversations, and figure out more long-term how we can start to find some solutions to these.
Thanks to all the candidates for your answers for that one. We are halfway through. We've gotten 5 questions already, 5 more yet to go. Next one deals with the achievement gap or the opportunity gap, and Arisa Jenkins, you'll be up first on this one. What programs would you implement to address the ever-growing achievement gap between high-achieving students and underserved students, particularly Black and Brown students and special needs children? Arisa Jenkins, you're first.
Well, as a board member, one thing I would encourage the district to consider doing is looking at some of the educational techniques that are used with or LEAP or our gifted programs. From my experience in just talking with staff, a lot of those techniques and things like that really are great for all students. So I think that would be one thing I would say. Also, we want to take a look at some of the programs that are working and figure out how we can expand them into some of our elementary schools. So we've got AVID, the Blue Ribbon Mentor Program and things like that. So let's take a look at some of those programs that are working and see what we can do to expand on them. And a lot of our achievement gap issues are opportunity gap issues. So we really need to focus on how we are as adults, because it's not the children, it's the adults, how we are getting trained and how we are implementing and interacting with our students on a day-to-day. So the district really needs to take a hard look at those trainings and procedures.
Sharp.
All right. Well, we talked some about this already, and I already talked about racial equity training. I feel like how important that is. Rizza mentioned 2 great programs that I think are continuing to find success for our Black and Brown students, and that's AVID and oh my God, what was it? Well, okay, and wow, that just totally threw me off. But one of the programs that we've had in the past, years ago, our staff talked to Black and Brown high school students to find out what things they felt like the staff was doing that made them feel the most welcome. We called this a Student 6, and it was 6 different things that they identified, and we passed on to teachers that these things would help to facilitate a more positive environment for these kids. And it got passed on to the schools, but then it got passed on with a whole bunch of other stuff, and it kind of got sidelined. And so we have a lot of programs that we've actually implemented or tried to implement in the past and could be really successful if we look at them again under a different lens. I'm sorry I ran out of time.
Ryan Jackson.
Hi, this question is a little bit concerning to me because it implies that there are no high achieving Black or brown students, and that is simply not the case. We need to look at the reasons why certain groups of Black and brown students aren't achieving as well as high achieving students, whether of the same race or not, and see what techniques and what they're doing to achieve. And I think looking at the foundation of what is causing that gap and attacking that is really important. But to assume or to imply that there are no high achieving Black or brown students is, I think, really misleading.
Tim Sucre.
I talked a little bit about racial equity earlier, and I think just the earlier that we start to address the problem, the longer the bigger the benefit is going to be for those students. As far as the achievement gap for special needs students, I was talking to a parent who said that she had gone through the process with an idea plan and felt like every step of the way it was just work for her. And I feel like we need to look at ways to introduce more support from administrative staff and to help these programs work as they're intended, and actually address folks' needs and not make it feel like, you know, every parent has to struggle the entire time to help their kid get the education that they deserve and that they have a right to.
Meredith Pruitt.
Thanks. We've been having this conversation in education for many, many years. This is pervasive, as we like to say, and it's true. It starts with reading. It starts with reading early and often. I'm actually thrilled that the legislature worked with the state superintendent and the governor to pass a phonetics-based teaching bill that is wickedly bipartisan and that will get to phonetics earlier in the classroom. And that will enable all students, not just Black and brown kids who are having trouble, achieving. And we need more accountability with this. So we keep talking about it, but I worry that we don't have any action behind it. So how can this board stand up and put an accountability system in place to ensure that we move the ball, and we move the ball quicker than we have been?
And George Griffin.
Thank you. I would not implement any new programs until we take a good look at all the programs we have in place and see what's working and what's not. We have an $80 million a year local budget, and most of that's in instructional services. We have lots of programs and lots of people. We need to take a good look and see what's working and what's not. And that's not to say I wouldn't say let's try some new programs, but before we do that, we also need to look at the opportunity issues that we've identified. Rizza mentioned AIG, academically gifted strategies, as an example. That's an excellent starting point. There's no magic in academically gifted teaching strategies. It cannot be used with all students. It's good, high quality instruction, and we need to do that. So I would want us to take a good hard look at the big picture before we add any new programs. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question goes first to Mike Sharp. Local educator supplement in the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City School District used to be the highest in the state. That has not been the case for a while, and this summer we were passed over by yet another district, New Hanover. What, if anything, would you do to address this change? And in particular, what would you say to veteran educators who have not seen their pay change in more than a decade at the state or local level? Mike Sharp, you're first.
Ironically, you're asking what would I say to myself as a veteran educator who has not seen my pay change. I mean, clearly we're using supplements to try to appeal to teachers to get them to come work here, and we want the best of the best. And so if that's not competitive anymore, then we need to increase it. I mean, we know that teachers are experiencing burnout more and more as the years go on. Even before COVID, this is already a problem. Our state is not doing much to make teachers feel welcome or encourage them to remain. And so I think the best thing that we can do is to look at increasing those supplements and any other benefits that we could think of. I've seen ideas floated about like that the district could help out with buying houses and could help with rent, things like that. There are many other perks that we could be pursuing, and I think we really need to do that in order to keep the best of the best.
Meredith Pruitt.
Yes. So, I think teacher pay is obviously part of this, and our good teachers and principals need to be paid well. I don't think that's, rocket science, and I think we can all agree with that. I wonder if there's an opportunity to think about, taking some of the burden off the teachers who feel, like they're already stretched and it's only, we're only getting to October. And so how do we think differently about other resources we can offer them in the schools and outside the schools? So, I think we need to empower the teachers to have, greater autonomy in some capacity. I also think enabling them and empowering them with better professional development opportunities, summer programs where they can, increase their knowledge base would go a long way to helping us to think about a more incentivized program for teachers.
George Griffin.
So there's nothing more valuable than an experienced teacher. And our pay scale works against, it's state funded. The problem is beginning teachers, I think the starting salary for 10 months, bachelor's degrees, $35,000 a year. We add a 16% supplement in Chapel Hill to that. But if you have a year's experience, it goes up $1,000, and the next year $1,000, and the next year $1,000. And you can be a 10 and 15-year veteran teacher and only be making $10,000 more than you did 10 years ago without General Assembly legislative increases. And that's simply not sufficient. One thing the district can do, and we actually used to do this when I taught here, is that the more experienced teachers got a higher supplement so that they could increase their salary more than what amounts to be just a little bit. So I would want to take a look at that, revisiting that again, quite frankly. Thank you.
Rizza Jenkins.
Our schools have been shown yet again that they are essential. We need to pay our staff like they are the professionals that they are. And so that's going to require us yet again to take a look at our budget. We've asked our state. Our state has not answered. So now it's time for us here in Chapel Hill to take a real hard look at our budget, where we're spending our money. And I know our board is doing that, and they're really scrutinizing every dollar and how we're spending it and tying it to outcomes, both from student and staff. But now we need to take a look one more time and increase our supplement and our salaries for all our staff across the district. Again, we have to pay our professionals like they're the professionals they are, in any other industry out there, in any other field. It's time for us to do it. We need to put our money, to what we're saying in our community. Let's pay our teachers the wages and salaries they deserve.
Ryan Jackson.
Yeah, this obviously is a big problem. And as a state employee myself, and my wife is also a state employee, we also feel the pain of not having a pay raise for a decade. And it's really challenging as for the educators that we're talking about right now to not see that increase that like every other industry would normally see. So I think one things we might want to do, as George was saying, like new teachers get a base pay and it's only goes up per year. One thing we could really probably do is work with our local higher education institutions and see if we can get our teachers into their higher education programs and then augment the cost of that tuition so that they can not only become better teachers, but also promote their careers and get higher pay because they are now at a master's degree or even a PhD level teaching in our schools. So I think working with our local colleges might also be a good way to help, make teachers feel how appreciated they really are and how valuable we see them.
Time. Tim Sukram.
I think the dumb answer is just to pay the teachers more. I'm not sure how far that's going to go. And I think that this is, I mean, frankly, there's a housing crisis that nobody really wants to talk about right now, is that prices are going up and up and up, and it was already bad here. It was already incredibly expensive to afford to live in Chapel Hill, and it is only getting worse. Our town government is dedicated to building more luxury apartments and pricing lower income people, who unfortunately are teachers, are generally among those low income people. And I think that's a major problem that we only have so much control over. I think we need to, I mean, do what we can to fight the legislature, fight with the town council, and try to work out a way to make Chapel Hill a more affordable place to live and a less exclusive place to live.
Next question, George Griffin, you're first on this one. The debate over teaching about racism and racial justice in the social studies curriculum and the role that educators are being asked to play has been fierce this summer. The local education agency makes the final decision over curriculum, but what is your vision for Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools for what is taught and how it should be taught? George Griffin, you're first.
My vision is that we need to teach a realistic history. I think the question's in reference to critical race theory and all the buzzwords about that, and I'll just put it out there. When I was on the faculty at North Carolina Central University 20 years ago, we were studying critical race theory then and its impact and how we might use it to inform our teacher training program. I addressed issues of white privilege at that time. The reality is our history has been taught from a white perspective by and large, and I think we need to balance the playing field. I know this is a hot button issue and sensitive to everybody, but come right out and say it. I would like our students to have a clear understanding of the reality of history from multicultural perspectives, so that they can be prepared, whether they're white or students of color, to go out into the world and make it. Thank you.
Rizza Jenkins.
Thank you, George, for decoding all those words. That it was the root of it is critical race theory. And again, I agree, this is just teaching history, truthful history, well-rounded, balanced history at the end of the day. And that's critical because we're trying to teach and educate our young minds to be critical thinkers, to walk out in this world and really take a look at the world as a whole, not from one lens, but see the whole world in all its beautiful diversity. So I think, yes, we should be ensuring that what we are teaching our kids is diverse, thoughtful, and inclusive of all aspects of our history. Whether we like it or not, whether it makes us feel a little uncomfortable, it's the truth, and we need to be teaching it to all of our children, and maybe some of us need to learn it ourselves. Thank you.
Tim Sucre.
This is a tough one because, I mean, I grew up in a multicultural community that looked like, I don't know. When I was in high school and they were teaching me about civil rights and history and things like that, they made it sound like racism was over. Everything is fixed. Everybody is fine. And the racial makeup of my high school seemed to reinforce that. And it was dumb. Basically, I learned a bunch of nonsense, a lot of kind of, just gliding over anything that seemed to make anybody uncomfortable or feel bad about how they may have profited or gained from their status, their skin color, their prior socioeconomic status. And it is no secret that this is an upper income community that we live in, full of a lot of privileged citizens. And I think it's very important, if we want to teach these kids the truth, they need to understand their place in this society. They need to understand how they fit in, and they don't need to be lied to. Thanks.
Ryan Jackson.
Hi, so I have a little bit of a different take. My issue with the critical race theory curriculum isn't that it isn't teaching accurate history, is that it is teaching victimhood and oppressors. It's dividing people into two different classes. And that is not something we should be teaching our students, because it is fundamentally telling one group of students that you cannot succeed based on what a different group of students is doing. And that is completely contrary to what we should be teaching our students. We should be teaching our students that they can succeed. They are responsible for their own education. They respond not for their own education, but for their own success for the most part. So I fully support the legislation that the North Carolina state legislation passed, even though it was vetoed by the governor, that critical race theory, especially as it focuses on victimhood and oppressors, should not be taught in our class, where, well, we still need to acknowledge that racism exists in our country, and we need to deal with that. But critical race theory itself, I do not approve of, and I would not support in our schools.
Mike Sharp.
The irony of a lot of the strong reactions of some people against critical race theory is that they think that I and other teachers like me stand at the front of the room and tell the kids stuff. And that's an antiquated model of how education works. What we do is present them with a lot of information, and we teach them to be critical thinkers. And so if we are presenting real history, what we know about what has really gone on, the kids are going to make their own decisions about that. If it makes some people uncomfortable, we need to recognize that that's an important step in this, and we need to be able to counsel them and have a lot of experience of working through what it feels like to be uncomfortable. But it should not be confused or conflated with guilt or with blame. And so I think a lot of people are thinking this is saying that white people are oppressors. That's not the case. It's not saying anything about current people. It's what we're learning about history.
Meredith Pruitt.
So I think if we can focus on the fundamentals of reading, math, and science, that will enable our students to think critically and to be able to lead in a global economy. And I believe that we should teach our students how to think, not what to think. Thank you.
All right, next question. Ryan Jackson, you're up first on this one. Public schools are mostly staffed by women, and as we've seen over the last 18 months, women have borne the biggest brunt from COVID and the corresponding need for care. In what ways can we make Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools better environments for women and families? And in particular, do you support paid family and medical leave? Ryan Jackson, you're first.
I've really been focusing on student education, helping them succeed, no matter how you want to define success. So I will be completely honest, and I have not been focusing on this, but I would, of course, support any programs or initiatives that make it easier for our women teachers, our women staff members, people that support our schools, to make it easier on their families as well as the children that they are raising as well. One thing we might want to look at to make it easier for them is some sort of childcare support for those women, because it's very difficult as we talk about the salaries that they're currently making, to also pay for affordable childcare. So I think if we can somehow figure out how to get that as part of the district budget, so that those young female teachers or staff members are reduced in that financial burden, I think that would go a long way to helping out.
George Griffin.
Yes, in answer to the question, I absolutely support paid family and medical leave. There's just no question about it. The number one thing for women and for men, stay-at-home dads too, is childcare when you have children. And the pandemic has just highlighted that, if you will, for all of us. It's been tough on families. Nobody can argue the psychological stresses, the change in behavior for all of us. Having your kids at home all the time. Oh my goodness, that's changed things. And a lot of us didn't realize how much we depended on schools until we didn't have them. So I would support any programs locally that we can do to make sure our children have structured places to be, and ideally, of course, in the classroom. Thank you.
Rizza Jenkins.
Yes, I 100% support paid family and medical leave. I've experienced some of these challenges myself in the workplace, so I can only imagine what it is like for our staff in our district with the resources they have to work with in terms of salary and options in terms of childcare and things like that. So I would support it 100%. Also, this shows how essential women are in the workplace, especially in our schools. And so this is where we really need to take a look at, not just in our schools, but in all our spaces, what workspaces and incentives and support look like for families, especially women in the workforce, because this is an important conversation. This is a conversation I'm even having in my industry as well, because we do not do a great job in realizing the immense work that women do in our society in terms of the workplace. So we need to make sure they're supported and resources are available.
Meredith Pruitt.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a no-brainer. Obviously, I support paid family and medical leave, and we need that, and it's devastating we don't have it. I think it's interesting, something else this uncovers, though, is the lack of males in the classroom. There was a great Wall Street Journal article a couple of weeks ago that said that in the next 5 years, for every 2 girls who go to college, only 1 boy will go. And we should be horrified by that, I think. I mean, I think that is going to turn into quickly a national crisis. So how do we think about strategies to get men back in the classroom, right? We talked a little bit about Black and brown and the achievement gap or the opportunity gap, and how can you look to a mentor or a peer in the classroom to be aspirational? So I think the district should think about those kind of strategies. I think that would go a long way alleviating, and, you know, who knows? I mean, maybe we could, you know, tug and push at the opportunity gap that way. So that's my answer. Thanks.
Tim Sucrum.
If we get the funding to expand pre-K programs, I want to make those pre-K programs available to all staff that work here, the teachers, the cooks, the custodians, everybody, because this is one of the major ways that we can, you know, fill that childcare gap. Another thing is that we have a rather sexist policy of starting school incredibly early in the morning and letting out early in the afternoon. So, for example, my daughter's elementary school is from 7:45 to 2:35 p.m. This is clearly a disincentive to work for young parents, be they mothers or fathers, and I hate it. And it's one thing that it keeps your kid away from you for more hours when you're working until 5 and paying for aftercare. And I think we need to support the aftercare program, make it more available, but also close that gap and make the schools, make the students, if they wake up later, they will perform better at every grade level. Thanks.
Mike Sharp.
All right, I am fully in favor of paid family medical leave. When my 2 older daughters were young, my wife at the time was also a teacher, and we discovered pretty quickly that it would cost one of our salaries entirely just for childcare. So I was a stay-at-home dad for 3 years, and she took some time off too, because we as teachers didn't make enough money to cover that cost and still keep our jobs. So this is bigger than just paid family medical leave. It goes back to our other question about, are we paying our teachers enough? I also want to add on to what Rizza was saying, that even you know, beyond the family medical leave, we need to make sure that our facilities are okay for women who are nursing, for you know, our staff who need other accommodations at school, because I feel like there's a little bit of a stigma that if you've left to take care of your kids, that you're not doing your job enough.
All right, next question. I think if I'm counting right, this is our last full question, and then we'll get to the lightning round after this. Yes, thank you, Cassie. Meredith Pruitt, you're up first on this one. Board members are often actively part of the Chapel Hill and Hill-Carrboro community, but not engaged in the day-to-day operations of our schools. How will you as a board member make sure that you are connected with schools so your decisions about the needs of students and staff are based on direct knowledge and observation? Meredith Pruitt, you're first.
Sure, thanks. So, I mean, I think as we talked about in the last forum, I think we're all together, and one of the most important character traits to being on a board is to listen. So I think listening in the community, and that means going out and meeting with community members, meeting with parents, meeting with students, meeting with principals and teachers to get a better understanding of what's actually happening at that sort of grassroots level. So you could imagine different convenings, throughout the year with small groups of folks. I think that, having an open door policy where, in particular for the superintendent to be able to come in and really strategize on what's working and what isn't. I mean, the board hires the super hires the principals are the captains who run the schools. So having a free flow of information there, I think would go a long way to ensuring that we at the board level would know what's happening on the ground. Thanks.
Mike Sharp.
All right, so how will I make sure I'm connected with schools? I am already connected to schools in many different ways. Having worked in them for so long, I have a lot of friends and colleagues that continue to give me feedback about what's happening in their schools. My wife is also a teacher at Sewell, and my younger kids one is at pre-K in Sewell and the other one wants to be there tomorrow if she could. So as I continue to have kids in the schools, I'll continue to get that perspective of being a parent in our system as well. So I think that's my main way of staying connected.
Tim Sukram.
I think that we need to make the school board communications and the superintendent communications two-way. And I think, because right now it's one-way, it's robocalls, it's emails that you can't reply to, email inboxes that aren't monitored, and it's nuts. And it feels like nobody's listening. Especially when we were all freaked out about Delta a month ago, it really felt like nobody was listening. So we need to connect, we need to make ourselves available, we need to ask the community for input in more interactive ways. The school board shouldn't be meeting at some Board of Education facility. It should be meeting at the schools. It should be having virtual meetings. It should be making those virtual meetings just as accessible as this one is. It should be easier to contact school committees. We should be meeting with parents groups. We should be meeting with teachers. We should all in all make it easier to talk to us, get feedback with us in every way that we can think of, because it's just critical. Thanks.
George Griffin.
As a board member, I would be absolutely excited to be in the schools. In fact, that's my intention, is just to drop into schools. As a former teacher, school principal, that's my natural habitat, if you will. And I intend to do that. For the past decade, I've spent assessing school districts around the country. And one of the things we did as part of it was to spend an entire day in classrooms out of a 3-day review and looking at learning environments and opportunities for students, not what teachers are doing, but what are the students doing? And one can quickly tell, is there good experiential learning going on in this classroom? Are these kids challenged? Are they learning skills in addition to knowledge? Or is it the more traditional teacher in front of the room talking to the students and students doing worksheets? There's a lot of board members can learn by just walking into schools. And I'm absolutely excited about the possibilities of doing that and would intend to do that. Thanks.
Rizza Jenkins.
I'm smiling at this question because for years I've been asked by kids and other people, so what exactly do you do at the schools? Because I spend a lot of time in the schools. So what I would really do is expand on a lot of my outreach that I've already done. It's interesting because our board membership already provides for liaison roles with different organizations and also has assignments for the board members to attend school improvement team meetings. So I would fully embrace possibly taking on a liaison role for organizations and schools maybe that I haven't had a strong connection or interaction with. Additionally, I would just continue my work and outreach with different parts of our community. So I've done a lot of volunteering in my neighborhood and other neighborhoods and other programs and things like that. So I would just really focus on continuing outreach and strengthening relationships with, our refugee outreach center and just going into a lot of the neighborhoods and meeting our families and community where they are. Because I think that's a lot of the challenges we're typically trying to ask other people to meet us where we are, but we really need to, as board members, go to where our family, staff, and students are.
And Ryan Jackson.
So I stay connected with the community by supporting my local athletic groups. My wife is actually the president of the Hill-Carrboro Athletic Booster Society, our booster club. So we are at every girls field hockey game, boys soccer game, football game, basketball game, interacting with the community, talking with parents, talking with students, seeing what's going on with them, as well as selling some yummy popcorn if you want to come by and get some this weekend. It's homecoming, so come on out. But on top of that, like that just gives us a good way of interacting with parents and the students in the school. So I think that's really important, whether it's at home or at away games. We go to all of them. But another thing that I think we could do to make sure we're involved with the community and the schools in particular is to sit at least in honorary or maybe even silent positions on local school boards or local school committees, whether it's the school improvement committees, whether it's local PTAs. Even if we can't make it to their meetings, let's get the notes and see what they're talking about. What are their concerns, and see if we can help them out with the things that they're seeing on the ground. So I think, going and being physically present at the schools is one thing, but also being on the local school committees, it would be a big plus to make sure we have like our feet on the ground type of thing and know what's really happening.
All right, that wraps up that portion of the forum. We got a couple of lightning round questions, 20 seconds each on this, so very short answers. And then after those 2 questions, we'll wrap up with concluding remarks. George Griffin, you're first up on this one. And again, 20 seconds to answer. Do you think the school board should have an advisory board consisting of students, parents, teachers, staff, and community representatives to help guide its decision-making process? George Griffin.
Yes, I think that's an exciting idea to have those groups represented, and sitting right there, being able to provide input would be great. Thanks.
Rizza Jenkins. Still muted. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Am I muted now?
Oh,
Okay,
you got
good.
it.
Thank you. Yes, 100%. And I've served on some of those boards. Key decision making requires views from all stakeholders, and that's actually in the Racial Equity Impact Assessment Toolkit that you actually take a listen to all stakeholders.
Ryan Jackson.
I absolutely support this, and I'm actually kind of surprised that it's already not in existence with our district.
Tim Sukram.
Oh yeah, 100%. But the thing to worry about is how easy is this to join? How many people know about it? How diverse in our various metrics of diversity is this group? But yes, let's do it. Sounds awesome. Meredith Pruitt.
Yeah, I love this idea. I mean, it speaks to the transparency that we need from a board. I think it speaks to community collaboration, and at the end of the day, we're in service to these stakeholders, so it's kind of a natural idea.
And Mike Sharp.
Yeah, I think it's an extension of what we already do and what we should be doing as a board to reach out to the whole community. I do agree with Tim, though, that we need to consider who is on that advisory board and how did they get on there.
All right, one more lightning round question, I think, coming up in just a second. Arisa Jenkins, you're up first on this one. What is one outside vendor or service that you think should be brought in-house or resourced to reduce costs? Arisa Jenkins.
Food nutrition, and it's critical because we have great resources here locally, and I think we could also bring that staff in-house.
Ryan Jackson.
I think data-driven models of student performance should be brought in-house. We have a very talented staff that could do that in-house pretty easily.
Tim Sukram.
The same, the nutrition.
Meredith Pruitt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ryan. I think data-driven decision-making has to happen by, thinking about data analytics more in a much more intelligent manner. So we need accountability in our school system, and that will go a long way to achieving that.
Mike Sharp.
I'm going with the food and nutrition idea because I think that's a great idea to bring in all the talent that we have locally.
And George Griffin.
One issue I hear from teachers a lot is that we are dependent on programs for solutions to our problems. And I would take a look at some of our curriculum programs that we're spending a lot of money on to see if we're really effective rather than supporting our teachers in the classroom.
All right, I believe that wraps up the lightning round. Only one more thing left to do, and that's our closing statements. Every candidate will have 1 minute to provide their closing statement, sum up any additional remarks, anything that you want to mention that you haven't gotten a chance to, and any rebuttals to anything that any of the other candidates have said. You've got 1 minute on this. Tim Sukram, we'll start with you. Wrap us up.
Hi, I'm Tim Sukram. I'm running for school board. You have 3 votes. I'm voting for George and Mike and a wild card. I suggest you do the same. But I want to deal with issues in a common sense manner. I want to make it easier to talk to the school board. I want to think about things in a long-term sense rather than a short-term stopgap sense. And I really want to, just attack these problems at the source and try to make this a stronger district, a more productive district, and give yourself an easier experience altogether. Thank you.
George Griffin.
So I want to thank Cassie Ford for all the organizing work you've done tonight on behalf of the PTA Council and the other 4 organizations. And Aaron, thanks to you too for a masterful job of getting us through a lot of questions. And then to the audience for being here and for your interest in these issues. I recently received an endorsement from and support from Equality NC, the oldest statewide organization in the country dedicated to securing rights for the LGBTQ community. Kendra Johnson, who's the executive director, stated, "We've carefully vetted these folks and we feel confident they'll be advocates for our communities, confident that these people will be strong advocates for racial justice and for lived equality for all." She said what I promised to everyone here tonight is that if elected, I will be a strong advocate for the success of all of our students. I look forward to working on the challenges in front of us. Thank you all.
Aaron, did you say anything? So should I go?
Yeah, go for it. I said Arisa Jackson. I must have not unmuted myself. Go for it.
Hey, Aaron, I want to thank you and Cassie for organizing this and keeping us all on track. You guys have done a great job. I'd also like to thank our sponsors who put this together. I really come at this from a foundational and a common sense approach to education. And if people who are watching want their students, want their children to get a solid education so they can compete on the world stage, which we now see ourselves in, I would hope that they would vote for me because I am going to take your children's education to heart, and I'm going to make sure I can do everything I can to make sure they get what they need educationally so that they can succeed in any way they see fit. Thank you.
Mike Sharp.
Yeah, I also want to thank Cassie and Aaron for running the show today and for all of our sponsors who brought this together in the first place. I want to end with a message to voters. If you watch this program tonight, think about all of the issues that we talked about with racial equity and ask yourself, is this where I want our school board to head? Is this the direction that we want to do to make sure that we're reaching all the kids as best we can? And think about whether or not you want data-driven approaches, which are mostly saying that students are not achieving the way that they should, because it tends to put the blame on the students rather than on the situation. So keep that in mind as you're voting. Thanks, y'all.
Meredith Pruitt.
Well, first, Mike, that's an interesting point, and I would ask, if we don't use data, then how do we measure success? I am running on a data-driven platform about data-driven decisions, the need for greater transparency and common sense and pragmatic thinking. I think tonight I showed that I have a little bit of a different perspective than the rest of the candidates, and about 800 people put me up to this. So I do have a small quorum of individuals who feel unrepresented in the current dialogue. And so I would just say, if you're out there and you feel like that too, then vote for Meredith Pruitt. Thank you very much.
Finally, Arisa Jenkins.
Thank you, Cassie, Aaron, and all the sponsors. I can definitely appreciate the work you did on this forum because I've done it a couple of times. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is really important to get this information out there for our election. Again, I'm Rizza Jenkins, and I'm running because education is the cornerstone of our society. All students are entitled to have their educational needs met, and our staff deserve to have the resources and support that they can make this vision a reality for our students. The work that I've done in this district demonstrates my commitment to our student, staff, and community. Through my leadership as the president of the PTA Council, I standardized the school improvement team election process to increase accessibility and diversity of parent representatives. I've supported our students, staff, and schools through my years of leadership through the PTA school improvement team. Also, my commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion work extends to my personal professional career, serving as the chair of the ED&I Committee for North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association and participation in many women and diversity groups in clean energy. I know I'll provide a voice for our students, staff, and community on the Board of Education. Thank you.
That concludes this evening's Chapel Hill-Carrboro City School Board Candidate Forum. Thanks to all of the candidates for being here and for giving your time. Again, Mike Sharp, George Griffin, Arisa Jenkins, Ryan Jackson, Tim Sukram, and Meredith Pruitt. Thank you for your praise there in the closing remarks, but I did very little. So all praise to Cassie Ford and the PTA Council and all the folks behind the scenes who gathered all of the questions, went through them, organized the whole thing. A whole bunch of people behind the scenes making this happen. Stephanie Freeman for keeping the time. We've got a couple of interpreters, Angie and Rudy, I believe, doing the Spanish interpretation tonight. So thanks to them. And thanks to our 5 sponsors, the Chapel Hill-Carrboro PTA Council, the Chapel Hill-Carrboro NAACP, El Centro Hispano, the Chapel Hill-Carrboro Association of Educators, and the League of Women Voters of Orange, Durham, and Chatham counties. Again, 33 questions were asked. We got to about 12 of them. All of the candidates will be given all of the other questions as well. And if you have questions that did not get answered tonight, or if you want to know more, feel free to reach out to the candidates. I think I speak for all of them when I say they would love to hear from you. They're all nodding and smiling, so I would assume so. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. Thanks to all of the organizers and the organizations who made it happen. Thanks especially to the candidates. Again, early voting starts on Thursday, October 14th, runs until the 30th. You can register and vote on the same day during the early voting period. Election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. A lot of important races on the ballot here in our community, including the school board. Thank you so much and have a good night.